Hello, and welcome to Evidence to Employment, Transition Research in Action, where research meets real life, where the future of work for youth with disabilities is being reimagined. For a closer look at our research studies, visit us at transition.vcurrtc.org. We're back today with Jaclyn Camden. She's the lead on a very important research study for higher education. And welcome back, Jaclyn. We want to talk a little bit more about the study today. So just give us a really quick review for our listeners who didn't get to be with us the first time on what your study's about.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Glad to be back. So if you didn't join us in part one, or even if you did, just a brief reminder, the study that I am working on and we'll talk about today, called Towards Higher Education for All Youth with Disabilities, is a study that looks at the impact and evaluates this professional development intervention that includes online training as well as a community of practice model for technical assistance for college professionals that are supporting students with disabilities towards internships and employment. So we're really looking at, does providing this professional development to our college professionals impact the access and experience of internships and employment for college students with disabilities?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what this professional development looks like. What is it that you want the college professionals to learn?
Right. So, first, with the kind of online training modules that is facilitated and live with the professionals, is really understanding how to provide career-related services to meet the unique needs of students with disabilities. So we're under the assumption that these college professionals, say your career services, really understand how to help students access opportunities, plan for their future careers. So this training is really on disability-specific topics, such as providing disability-affirming, student-centered career planning. So it's taking kind of what these professionals already do, but ensuring that they're equipped with the knowledge and skills to apply that to all students, including students with disabilities.
How did you decide on this specific approach to training the professionals versus, you're already doing work with students. What made you decide to do this particular approach with the course and the the other aspects of your training and your research?
Right. So this current study actually builds on a previous study that we did, as we talked about, if you listened into part one, where we took this kind of professional development intervention, applied it to college professionals within inclusive higher ed programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and found that it was very effective in improving staff's ability to support students in internships and employment. So we wanted to kind of take the success of that study and apply it to a broader range of professionals working with students with a variety of disabilities. And I think looking kind of at a global view of why are we targeting professionals is because we see that a lot of times it is environment, it is our institution, it's our professionals that are really kind of disabling because they are creating some type of barrier, whether it's just because they don't have the tools and strategies that they need in order to support students. And so really to impact not just, one student by one student. We wanted to look at our system and how the professionals are being trained to support students in institutes of higher education. So that's really why we're looking at, does providing this training, professional development to the professionals, then impact students' actual experiences.
So you have a online course. Tell us a little bit more about that. Why online? Why not in person?
Well, because we are a national study, and so we wanted to make sure that we're reaching not just here in our state in Virginia for those who could come together, but we were able to look at this intervention across the nation in different regions and different environments to look at its impact. And so in order to have access nationwide, we have this online course.
Oh, great, great. And then your research study includes community of practice. That is something, a phrase that we use a lot in our field. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that will look like and who the participants will be?
Right. So we'll be, after we finish the online course, that is 6 weeks, the participants in the study will spend a year engaging in the community of practice together. And this was something that really comes out of what we learned in the first study that we did, is the importance and the impact of community, and being able to bring people across the country who are doing similar work, who are interested in learning and in engaging and improving their services together. So it wasn't just us facilitators, telling them what to do, but they were learning in community. And so I think that's what's really impactful about these community of practices is we have that specific lens of supporting students with disabilities in internships and employment. And we have a kind of a common thing that we're working towards to improving. But it's an opportunity for mutual learning and engagement. And then hopefully, after the year is done, they still have this community to rely on even after the study's over.
Excellent, excellent. So, what is the biggest challenge? Well, before we start there, how many people or different colleges or universities are participating in the study?
Right. So for this specific study, we are looking at 4-year colleges and universities, and we will run this professional development intervention. So the online course plus the community of practice 3 times. So we'll have what we call cohorts. So 3 cohorts going through this intervention. And we're actually last week just started our first group. And so we will have about 10 enrolled. And this is really our pilot year where we start with a little bit of a smaller group and we get feedback on the intervention. So, what worked, what was missing, and then we'll make some tweaks. And then year 2 and 3 will be what we call our intervention year. And each year we'll have 20 sites or colleges or universities participate in each year. So we'll have a total of 40 from years 2 and 3 involved in the study.
So what you said that you did this in the previous study, this kind of format for the research design. Mm-hmm. So what did you find to be the biggest challenge with this intervention? Anything that kept you up at night, or because I know research can be challenging, doesn't always go the way you want it to, but yeah.
Right. And, honestly, I think the biggest challenge, not necessarily in design challenge, maybe in design challenge, but is time. And that's a lot of the feedback that we got from the participants in the previous study is that this is something that we want to do, but we do a lot. We wear all these different hats, and our time and our staffing is just so limited that it was sometimes hard to come to the monthly meetings as emergencies arise and there was direct student support that was required, which is one reason that in this kind of current study, one of the things that we'll talk about is staffing and funding, because we know that especially right now in higher ed, you're doing more with less, right? And so I think that's kind of just the biggest challenge is we know and we're hearing that these are topics and issues that are really important to professionals, but they've got to carve out the time to learn and to, engage in this type of training. So I think just time is the biggest kind of barrier when we're looking at this type of research.
Okay. So given that the goal is to see the impact on employment, that's what you're going to measure, what would success look like?
Right. So we're measuring not only the experiences that the students that these professionals are working with get in terms of internships, employment, but we're also looking at what we call self-efficacy. So this is the confidence of these professionals to be able to provide these disability-specific supports around career development, internships, and employment. So what we're hoping to see is not only students getting more experiences that are aligning with their strengths and their interests and their career goals, but we're also looking our professionals feeling more confident in just their ability to do this work. So that's what we're hoping to see from this study.
Given that this is a 5-year project, how are you going to stay motivated? Because research can be unpredictable. So,
Right.
are you prepared how do you prepare for if things don't go as planned? Or what are you looking at in terms of, how do you stay motivated during the process? Because I know sometimes, no matter what you do, things may not pan out the way you want to, and this is
Right.
such important work. What do you how do you handle that?
Well, I think that as if you listen to part one, I talked a little bit about the need for professionals to be able to pivot, to be innovative. And I think that when you're doing the research, when those things needs arise, that we have to be able to do that as, following our IRB protocols and all of that. But I think what keeps me motivated and why I really love doing these types of studies is because you're working with people. It's not a survey that we're sending out and we're just analyzing, the results of the surveys, but we're working directly with people who are doing the work. And for me, people motivate me. And I love engaging and with people. And I think that's why this community of practice, I think is going to be impactful, is because we get to be in community with each other, right? And so I think that's really what motivates me, is just community. And then also seeing the impact it has on students and their experiences and their lives. And so this type of work puts you kind of right in the middle of that, instead of always stuck behind your desk, looking at your computer, even though a lot of this is online. But I think that's what motivates us. And I think this types of research allows for innovation and creativity. And that's what we do in our field. So I'm excited.
Do you feel like that the trend now is going towards more students with disabilities being able to access higher ed? And
Yeah.
why you're getting this overwhelming response?
Right. So we definitely do see more students with disabilities accessing higher education. We've seen a good steady increase over the last 10 or 15 years. So we're seeing more and more students with disabilities entering into higher education, as they should have that access. But we know a lot of our institutes, whether it's higher education or not in this country, were not made for people with disabilities in mind. And so a lot of the systems, a lot of the services that we're providing, a lot of the training that professionals to do this work is not really on the foundation of providing services to all. And what our college campuses look like. I always laugh when people talk about, what a traditional student. There is no traditional student anymore, as we see in higher education. But we have to start improving those supports and services for this kind of new landscape of higher ed, for maybe what college wasn't built for, but now serves. And so I think as it's our responsibility as college professionals to be able to serve all students, and that includes students with disabilities. So, I guess coming back to the point that, we're working on better access, but we still have to work on that success, right? As we're opening doors to better, include all students in higher ed, we now have to better serve all students in higher ed. And I'm not sure if we're there yet. And so that's what I'm hoping this study will help do, is serve all students.
So with that in mind, and I know your study is targeting college professionals, but what advice, based on this study, would you give to college students who with disabilities who might be listening to our podcast right now?
Yeah. So what advice would I give to students? I think that my first piece of advice is to go access those resources that you have on campus. Most campuses have career services. They might have internship coordinators. And so get connected with those different types of resources around campus. I also think that have your voice heard. If you're not receiving the services that you need to be successful, have those conversations and advocate for what you need. And, get connected, I think, is my piece of advice. Get connected, advocate, reach out to our center. Let us know what your experiences are, and how we can continue to kind of work together in this work.
And as much as we would like, not every college professional will be able to access the wonderful work that you're doing or be a part of this study. So what advice would you give to college professionals who are currently supporting students with disabilities towards internships or employment?
Yes, I think that definitely find other opportunities. There are a variety of different organizations out there that do good professional development. I'm thinking about, AHEAD. It's not just for, disability accommodations and support. They do a lot around supporting career development for students with disabilities and enhancing professionals. Get connected with agencies and organizations in your local community, like vocational rehabilitation, that is really about supporting students with or people with disabilities in employment. They have a lot of good resources. But do know that if you wanted to be in the study to get the professional development and you can't, the course will eventually be widely available. And so, we talked about the study previously. We did an online course, and that is supported employment. So really, how do you support students through, getting to know your student, job development, job site training, all of that for college students with intellectual disability. So that's already on our website, free. You can access that. And just like that course, eventually we'll have this online course with the modules widely available too. So unfortunately, it won't be for another 3-4 years, but that is the goal, to have what we've learned widely available, and so you can replicate this at your institution.
Okay, great. So I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, but what's the next step for this research? What are you planning for? Because you're in your first year. What's going to happen year 2 and beyond?
Yep. So as you mentioned, we're in our first year of our first group of participants going through this study. And so we'll gather a bunch of information about the process, the impact on the professionals going through, on the students that they serve. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll take all of that really good information and we'll make some tweaks as needed, if needed, to the intervention. And then so our next year 2 and 3 group of participants will get that intervention. And then once we did our 3 groups that move through the intervention, then we'll work on kind of reporting out what we learned, looking at our data to see the impact and the effectiveness of this intervention. And so we'll be reporting out on that, as well as we'll make these materials that we're developing widely accessible so other professionals can access that. So that's kind of where we're going. We're really excited to kind of just get started, and really excited about the next few years doing this work.
Yeah, if you were speaking to your younger self, just stepping into the field, what would you say about where this road leads? Because you've done some important work to make higher education available to all students with disabilities, and for them to be successful, and for college professionals, like you said, college for all. So what would you tell your younger self that would get you in this road now? I mean, is there anything that you would do differently?
I don't know if there's anything that I would do differently, but I do think that maybe I would tell myself to be open to opportunities, because as somebody who gets very anxious about change or new things, or, where life is leading you in places that you didn't expect to go, is that, enjoy the ride and pivot where you need to pivot, and take the opportunities that maybe you never thought that you would have. I think that, before I came into the kind of world of higher education, I was really focused on just employment. And then one of my greatest mentors, Liz Getzel, who was the director for ACIT in college, as well as the Center on Transition Innovations for many years, really pulled me into ACIT and kind of opened this door that I never knew existed. And whether it was new to me, I kind of took on that opportunity. And so I just think to tell myself that, be open to these new opportunities. And also I think, surround yourself, with people that are passionate about the work that you're doing. I talked about Liz, mentor. There's just a lot of people, and a lot of those people are students that I've worked with, that have really helped me, encouraged me, and mentored me. And so, don't underestimate the importance and power of people and community in your life. So I think that's the advice I would give myself.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, it appears you have taken that advice, because you don't have a problem with pivoting. You are motivated to keep this going and to expand. I think that it's incredible work that you're doing. Any final thoughts for our listeners about the importance of this work?
I think that, just to stay motivated, to do the work, to grow and to expand in terms of providing supports to students. And I think that my overarching kind of advice is, always centering students and their voice and their needs. And, while we're doing this study that's really about providing college professionals the professional development to support students with disabilities, I try to never lose sight, and I hope other people don't lose sight of, it's all about the students. And they should be the center of our work, and their voice and the wonderful things that they're doing should be guiding what we do. So I think my advice is just, keeping the students at the center.
Absolutely, because that's who's important, most important.
Right.
So thank you so much, Jaclyn, for joining us and for sharing this very important research study. I know that great things are going to happen on campuses across the nation because of the work that you're doing. And for our listeners who want to learn more about this study or VCU's Rehabilitation, Research, and Training Center, you can visit transition.vcurrtc.org. And we will be having Jaclyn back maybe next year to share updates on how the study is progressing. So make sure you subscribe and don't miss an episode. So that's all for today. And we thank you for listening. And remember that the future of employment and higher education is inclusive, and research like Jaclyn is doing is showing us how to get there.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
The contents of this podcast were developed under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, grant number 90RTEM0014. NIDLR is a center within the Administration for Community Living, Department of Health and Human Services. The contents of this podcast do not necessarily represent the policy of NIDLR, ACL, HHS, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government.